I'm not a scientist. I read very little about science. But I have been in rooms where some very, very prominent scientists from France, from Germany, from the United States, from Canada, have been in discussions with Dr. Bounous. And the reverence that they hold for Dr. Bounous and for his scientific research is something that's worth beholding. And I realize that I'm very privileged, and I think we're all privileged to be able to sit here and be in the same room with true genius. And it's not just me who believes this, but some institutions as great as the U.S. Congress believes that as well. Because I believe when the first serendipitous thing to happen was when Dr. Bounous went from Italy to Indianapolis. And after doing some work in Indianapolis, the U.S. immigration laws decided that he could not apply or could not remain in the United States, and he would have to go back to Italy. And I would rather if Dr. Bounous would tell you what happened to him that brought him to Montreal in particular and Canada in general.
I was very happy to realize that the atmosphere at McGill was quite comparable to what I had found in the United States. I must emphasize one very important thing of a great man, a great Canadian called Lester Pearson. You probably, some of you remember him. He instituted what was called the Medical Research Council. That was a very noble institution which allowed some scientists to pursue their research in their area of choice independently, with, of course, supervising by their peer that the scientific method was there and everything. It was thanks to that institution I was able to continue my research on what the area wanted. The reason I'm saying this because for over 20 years I was funded by the council. There were some stressful moments during the site visit, but I was able to overcome more of them, but that makes a lot more interesting. Now, I like to compare government with free enterprise because I was personally involved in this thing, and I was able to realize the major difference, as I knew that discoveries are not made by scientific committee, are made by individuals who have been lucky and persistent. But government thinks differently, especially in the last 10 years. As I was reaching my level of performance and achievement, the council we had in the meantime changed name into a Canadian Health Institute. See, politicians don't like the word medical. It reminds them something sad, diseases, and also social science. So we are health professionals. And as an health professional, I was cut off completely when, at the time, what I should have been continued. And what was worse, not only my funds were cut off, but my salary was cut off. It was only the heroic effort of McGill that maintained my salary until retirement. But I couldn't do any research. That when free initiative came in the action in the person of Mr. Beer. And he realized, you see, free enterprise has this very interesting feature, which I think is common sense, which politicians seem to lack. And our federal government, which I will not name, you all know who it is, it has become increasingly involved with vigor in establishing priority. So somebody in Ottawa decided that the mapping of the human genome was the only way to go. Everything else had no relevance, so I was out. And at the same time, I had 2 hip replaced. I was not very happy. And Mr. Beer was able to, he knows that free enterprise is expensive. He knows that well. And, but he didn't give up, and they supported me morally and with great strength. And as I'm a poor traveler, tell me when I have to stop because that was and I'm a poor traveler. I travel with me through 3 continents, including Japan, to try to bring into fruition to the real world this what we presume to be a discovery.
Dr. Bounous, we're just running a bit ahead of ourselves, but because the point I wanted to make, after Dr. Bounous came to McGill, a few years later, the U.S. Congress, there appears in the congressional record the fact that because of U.S. immigration laws, the U.S. lost one of their great scientists to Canada, and that is an actual fact. Subsequent to that, while you were at working on the product, when you were working at the product, and I only found this out through your book and reading your book, you ran into problems with some of the scientific research. And how that problem was solved, I think, is as close to a miracle as we'll ever come to. And I think that's worth sharing with the audience.
Yeah. Well, it usually happens. Research is not a very easy task. Everybody has devoted its life to that. And at one time, this product ceased to work. It was carrying me on for 7 beautiful years, but all of a sudden, nothing worked anymore. The study on cancer didn't work. The study of immune enhancement didn't work. So I was very concerned, but I knew the data so far were real. Of course, I blamed my technician, but she was right. The poor girl wasn't doing anything wrong. So I blamed the company that was producing the concentrate. They were kind enough to come from Denmark, and they assured me, and they were absolutely honest, that there was nothing changed. So at the time, I watched a television program from Basel, of all places. It was a very interesting program, edited by Gourmet. And what they were saying that the cheese didn't taste any much as good as it used to be. That was in the late 70s. And they made an investigation, Swiss, very thorough people, and they want to know what has happened. And what they did discover is that because of an epidemic of salmonella in France, the level of pasteurization temperature has increased from 73 to 78 for the milk. So it was not the fault of the whey production. So the Dane was right. It was not the fault of my technician. It was just the way milk was handled. So I thought, well, this is something that it's interesting because there was a coincidence, temporary, chronological coincidence with my failure and what has happened. It was worldwide change in pasteurization temperature. To play safe, they just raised the temperature to kill the presumed pathogen. So I rushed to St. Hyacinthe to see Dr. Oruz, which was an expert in milk chemistry. And he told me that, well, between 73 and 77, you can unfold, in other words, begin to denature some of the cysteine-rich protein. And this is, in fact, what had happened. And we were able to reproduce the old-fashioned production and resume to find their function again.
So you mean, doctor, that it's not you? It's some chef on some TV show that really...
Yeah, they said the cheese wasn't as good as it used to be. And then I had the reason there was a lot of co-precipitate. Some of the whey was precipitated in the curd, and they even had a little show. They said the underground in Switzerland to buy the old cheese, not be caught by the police and all sorts of things. And but serendipity does not involve only the individual. It also involves other groups. And I just like to mention 4 events that had occurred in the stretch of about 5 years in different parts of the world that were fundamental to the origin of Immunotec. The number 1 was the fact that the whey was polluting the river, forcing the dairy industry to remove the water, to concentrate it, and then create the whey protein concentrate, which was sent to me. Without that, I would have never found it. Then I found accidentally this effect on the immune system. With the help of Dr. Conshaven, we were able to establish was indeed the immune system effect. It was not a cross-reacting antigen thing. Then, this is the second event. The third event was at the same time, Fidelis and Sen discovered that the lymphocytes, which are the immune cell, in order to perform, require glutathione. And without glutathione, they will not optimize their response. So I say, there's something interesting. At the same time, Meister in the States described best than anybody else the role of cysteine in the synthesis of glutathione. So all I had to do is to see if by any chance glutathione was not involved. And in fact, our whey protein were rich in cysteine. So I put 2 and 2 together, and I measured glutathione in my lymphocyte. I found that indeed, although it was depleted in the control animal, it was sustained in the one eating whey protein. And the counterproof was, of course, if I could block the synthesis of glutathione with BSO, the immune enhancer was abolished. So all these things came together, but without each one of those 4 events, I could, Immunotec would not have originated.
Then, Doctor, maybe you didn't know Dieter.
No.
He was not a friend of yours. How did you meet Dieter? Under what circumstances?
I met it in the Dr. Gold office, and he told me afterwards that before I met you, I used to be rich, he told me. that thing I remember, because I have a very strong guilt complex, and I don't like to spend money, I don't like to have other people spending money, but the thing was expensive, and to keep an office in Montreal. And with this funding, one of the first things we did is to establish that the whey protein had to be undenatured, and the SS bond of cysteine had to be preserved in order to be effective, because cysteine does not travel safely in the plasma. It has to be in the form of the disulfide. And only if you kept it undenatured, it remains disulfide. And when I asked myself, what would have happened if Dieter Beer didn't come over? I would have gone to Italy where the climate is mild and the winds are calm and I love it. But I would have gone back home, of course. But then you say somebody else would have followed. That's not necessarily so. Because if you take the whey protein concentrate on the market, most of them are denatured and instantized, and they lose their effectiveness. So that's one thing that is important. We were able to ascertain, and Mr. Roberts also, to preserve it with aluminum foil so the humidity doesn't move in to start denaturation. There's some serious detail. If I, as an old dog in research, I said detail make the big difference between success and failure.
In 1956 and 7, I was a student at City of London School of Economics and graduated then there in economics and international law. But we had a professor, an Irish, very interesting man, Professor Owen, who at the final day of the course told us something. He said, look, you all have made it, you all get your certificates. You all have different qualities, which can mean success for you in life. I know there are some of us, some of you, like me, who are great speakers. If we use the opportunity where we can use our speech, we are successful. There is none really here, but there are people who are genius. Now, if they are lucky and they use their genius in the right way, they are on top of the world. There are some here which are great thinkers. That's the biggest problem. Those which are great thinkers, they think and think and think. And because they think, they see all the negatives. And they'll never do anything. So lucky those thinkers who do something. And then there are some of us who are just doers. Normal people, doers. They do. If they are lucky and recognize a chance somewhere, decide to do it and stick to it, they're successful. Canada looked to me like the dream country. So I said, well, retire to Canada. We came over here 85. And I worked very hard on my retirement, started even to play golf and all kind of things. And I happened to have some apartment building in Montreal. And we had 2 empty floors. And suddenly a doctor came, somebody from University McGill, and said, well, you know, we need 2 floors for research in cancer. So research in cancer sounds very interesting. So let's meet. And I met Dr. Bounous, Dr. Kungshaven, and some of the doctors for a discussion. And when they told me the plan was to install equipment to make trials with cancer cells and so on, I said, oh. Below the 3 floors is Monenco, one of our top engineering companies. I have to ask them first. Monenco said, no way. In the same elevator which we are using, cancer patients, cancer, no. So what I thought Dr. Bounous' idea was very interesting, so I invited him for dinner. And with him and Kungshaven, we had a very interesting dinner, and I had some relations in my family to nature healing, so I was very interested, and he told me of his mice. He said, first time in my life I heard of genetically, one breed mice. And he said, I have 100 mice who have been eating my development, my discovery, and I have another 100 who didn't get it. And you know, the 100 which we injected with carcinogens, 80% didn't get cancer. The other one, 80% got cancer. I said, that's very interesting. Yeah, you said, you know, but the trouble is, I'm going to retire very soon, like me. And I have no more funding. And I think one can even patent it. I'd love to develop it. But how? So I got his papers, sent them to a friend, a professor in Germany, sent them to my patent lawyers in Germany. And they said, yeah, sounds good, but long way to go. So anyway, we got together, and in '88 we decided to found a little company. In '99 we had Immunotec Research Corporation, and I put Dr. Bounous in my office in Montreal, gave him a secretary, and thought, well, give him a little funding and it will work. Yeah. Not so easy. So Gustavo Bounous, I started to negotiate with various kind of companies and said we have to market it ourselves. We can't license it. It's too good. It's a dream of my life. I'm convinced. Since I take it, which is since '93, I'm getting younger every year. Well, I'm 66 over, so I have all my wrinkles because the cosmetic is still missing, but I'm okay. So anyway, we sat down. We approached marketing companies here. We talked with distributors like, you know, Swiss and Jameson and so on. They all scratched their head and said, dairy product, we can't say what it can do. It's expensive to produce. We have to sell it at a certain price. Okay, finally I got one almost ready, signable, ready contract to cooperate with one company in Ontario, and came Alex. And I discussed with Alex the question. I said, yeah, no, Alex, it's a legal problem too, and we really still can't say what it can do, but what do you think? And he said, I said, I know somebody. I know a company who is just a startup company in multi-level marketing. You should look at multi-level marketing. So I remembered that the contact in my big pharmaceutical company said, Dieter, don't go to the pharmaceutical, look at multi-level marketing. Now, I've been doing business all my life, but I only knew multi-level marketing exists somewhere selling perfume. So it didn't mean anything for me. So I looked into a few companies. I went to New Skin also. I said, they sell 500 products. They sell sex stimulants and creams and perfumes. And don't think it works. And then Alex convinced me, so I met Chuck. I said, looked at him, and said, well, there is another doer. So 2 doers together, well, may work. And we got together, we got to know each other. I said, well, I have the genius here. I have a doer here. Maybe I can retire.
Dieter,
So,
could I chime in and tell them how I came to meet you?
Well, please.
Because that to me was really the hand of God, as our friend pointed out. I was having dinner on St. Lawrence Street in Montreal with a very good friend of mine who was a notary. We were there with our wives, and I asked him about another mutual friend who I knew had cancer of the ovaries. And I asked my friend, how is this other friend doing? And he said, she's doing very, very well. I said, what do you mean she's doing very well? I thought she really had problems. He said, well, she's taking this product, Immunotec. And I asked him, what about Immunotec? He said, well, it's a friend of his, a client of his by the name of Dieter Beer, who has financed some scientists at the Montreal General Hospital. And they were producing this product in just enough quantities to test it and to give her some of it. And she was doing remarkably well. I said, well, why isn't this product marketed? He said, well, they've tried every which way to market the product through drug companies, and it just wouldn't work. And we got off to another subject. And about 3 weeks later, it was about 4 o'clock in the morning when I do most of my serious thinking. And I remembered my dear friend Chuck Roberts. Chuck and I go back about 30 years, although you can all notice that I'm considerably younger than Chuck. But we were good friends. Not only was I Chuck's lawyer, but Chuck and I have been dear friends, and Chuck had started a small multi-level marketing company. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. If I could get Chuck together with Dieter Beer, and Dieter Beer's product is as good as my friend told me it was, then maybe we have a winner. I called my friend first thing in the morning, and he told me, well, Dieter's a very, first of all, he lives in Ontario. That was strike one. But Dieter is very, very particular about this. Anyway, I told him, that it would be treated with the utmost respect. And it took about 2 weeks to convince Dieter to meet with me. And I told him about Chuck and the idea. And frankly, the rest is history. I now turn it over to Chuck.
Well, a little serendipity and timing is everything, because timing, I guess if Dieter hadn't come along and Gus, well, first of all, Gus hadn't come along, we wouldn't have the product. If Dieter hadn't met Gus through all sorts of, little trials and things that happen in life, we wouldn't have been here. If Alex hadn't called me that day, am I still on here? That day, I wouldn't have gone down to meet Dieter. Now, Dieter was retired, Gus is retired, I was retired. And I wasn't going back to work, really. I had a little thing going here, and we did have a small company starting just to keep, you have to stay busy. I must work. I can't retire, but the idea wasn't to work quite this hard. And so when Dieter and I got together, we had a great time at the lawyer's office for a few months. I mean, that was really something. But we did get the thing together, and we did open the doors. It took us 8 or 9 months to get it together. When I first saw the product from Dieter, the first canister he gave me, and I'm not a big reader. A lot of you know me, and I really don't sit down and read technical stuff. But I do understand this product because I've listened to Dr. Bounous and John Molson, who's probably the biggest technician outside a doctor we have, and everybody about the product for years. So I understand it very well. Now, once I understood and read about the product at Alex's office and had the product, which had a lot of fat in it at the time, and it didn't have any shelf life. I mean, we may have had a shelf life for maybe 2 months if we were lucky at the time, and we were still considering doing it. It was probably going to have to be a couple $100 a box because it was really expensive in the first, you were around $1,500 or $1,600 a kilo at the time, and we still thought we had to market this to the market because of the strength of the product. And it took us during, I think, our negotiations and over that period of time before we opened the door, and it was about 8 or 9 months before we got the door open for the product, we got the product to where it sort of is today. And it's been improved, by the way, quite a bit since we started that product, the product you get today. And we finally got it to the market. Now, here's you've got 3 retired guys, but at least 3 of us work here. We've got 4 if you go to Alex, and he's retired. He came out of it. John's not quite retired yet because he's still a kid. Look at all the retirees up here, okay? Retired, retired, retired. We all want to retire, but we can't retire because of what we've got here. And if you look at the connection, I mean, you've got a Molson and you've got a beer. I mean, the Roberts and Konigsberg have nothing to do with this at all. So, you know, the story is great. We are missing some of the little points in the story, but generally, this is all timing, and it was timing by mistake and luck that we got to where we are today.
What you all should know is that my partner over here changed my life 4 years ago. And I remember it almost the day we were walking back from his office, referring to Chuck, and he said to me, okay, one of us is going to have to learn the science. So, I mean, I threw myself into it, and I completely dedicated myself the last 4 years, 7 days a week, and, you know, I feel so privileged to have a professor like Dr. Bounous as my personal assistant that I could call upon, much to his demise sometimes at too early in the morning, and he got mad at me, but then he forgave me when it was 8 o'clock and he had his breakfast. But he's had the patience of Job with me. I remember getting the scientific articles, bringing them back to my office, and it took me an hour to go through an abstract. I had the Dorland Medical Dictionary on one side, and then a whole book on amino acids and milk science on the other side. And it's such a rewarding feeling to be part of an organization, to have a job where, number one, you can learn something, and number two, you get to speak to distributors every day and have positive feedback from distributors. So, and I really, I thank Chuck for starting the company, and I can't tell you how great it is to be able to work with people like this and work with people like you. Thank you.
It would not be fitting of my billing as a lawyer if I didn't have the last word. But I'd like to tell you the day that I really became committed to the product. I wasn't, this was after the deal had been signed, shortly after the deal had been signed with Dieter and Chuck. And Chuck had really come out of retirement and went to work for the first time in his life. I was fortunate enough.
This is from a lawyer that loses his car in a parking lot.
It's not something we need to discuss today, Chuck. But I was fortunate enough that my daughter gave birth to my first granddaughter, and I was at the Mount Sinai Hospital just across the street in Toronto. And I remember both Dieter and Gus telling me about Dr. Baruchel and the work that he had done, and the work he had done previously at the Pasteur Institute in Paris. And I remembered that Dr. Baruchel was now, I think, the head of immunological research at the hospital and a professor of medicine at the University of Toronto. And I went up to see him, and I introduced myself to him and told him that I was partly instrumental in getting these two gentlemen together. And he looked at me, and I will never forget that incident. He looked at me and he says, "Alex, do you understand what you have in your hands?" I said, "Dr. Baruchel, I am not sure what you mean." He says, "Do you understand what Immunotec can do?" And I said, "Again, Dr. Baruchel, I am not sure what you mean." He said, "Well, this product is capable of
You're listening to America's Health Talk.